Welcome to this video tutorial. My name is Mrs. Cook. I'm an A-level sociology teacher and AQA examiner. Today's video is all about those 10-marker method-based questions. They appear on paper 1 or paper 3, and there are 4 easy steps to get into the top band. Okay, let's have a look at this 10-marker. Outline and explain 2 strengths of unstructured interviews. Now, it doesn't tell you the type of strengths to talk about, so we are able to pick, and I'll show you just how to do that in the next step. There are going to be 4 steps to take to get into the top band, so let's get on with step 1. Step 1 is state the strength, or if it's a weakness question, the weakness. So here, with unstructured interviews, we need to pick a strength, and you've probably evaluated methods in your lessons using pervert or PET. So you just need to pick one of those. Always tell the examiner if it's a theoretical or a practical or an ethical strength or weakness that you are looking at. So here is an example of what you might write. A theoretical strength of using unstructured interviews is that they tend to be high in validity. So that's step 1 done. Is where you specify what that strength actually means. So we've picked validity, so we need to tell the examiner what it means. Validity means the data truly reflects participants' meanings and reality. Now this, unfortunately, is where a lot of students stop. So what you need to do is make it much more detailed. And one way you can do that is to bring in the theory, because it's a theoretical strength, of who would say that. Interpretivists argue unstructured interviews are high in validity because. So now you're trying to explain why or what you mean. Because they use open-ended questions. They allow participants to fully explain the reasons behind their answers. The researcher can probe for further answers, clarify misunderstandings, allowing a rapport to be established. And just to secure the mark, why not say why they are important for having this characteristic? Because you can get much more detailed information, they are brilliant for complex social behaviour. So we've put, because they are high in validity, unstructured interviews are typically used to understand more complex behaviour. And that is step 2 done. Now, lots of students would just stop there, and lots of students are unable to bring in an example of a sociologist who was able to look at a complex social behaviour and get a really deep understanding. So tell the examiner a really good example. And Debash and Debash are brilliant for this, because Debash and Debash are feminists who looked at the complex behaviour of abuse, domestic abuse. So I've put, for example, Debash and Debash conducted unstructured interviews with women living in refuges in Scotland. These allowed them to gain lots of qualitative data, focus on detailed personal accounts of domestic violence and relationships. So what we have here is a really good example of somebody who's used that method and was able to look at something very, very complex and with this suitable method. And you've got concepts as well. You're able to show the examiner the type of data you're going to get, which is qualitative, lots of long answers. So that's step 3 done. And the last step, which most students forget to do, is they just stop at the sociologist. Now tell the examiner why it's important, and this will gain you much more analysis marks to get you into the top band. So going back to Debash and Debash, we're going to expand slightly on why it's important to use that method. So the aim was to understand why violence occurs and how women experience and interpret it, not just measure it. Therefore, unstructured interviews are valued as they produce lots of data, high in validity, which can uncover hidden realities of people's complex experiences that much more structured methods wouldn't. So there you have it. That is your 4 steps to the top band. You'd have to do it twice because it asks you to outline and explain 2. We're now going to look at the answer as a whole, just so you can see the 4 steps all in one place. So as a recap, the question is outline and explain 2 strengths, and you can practice these steps with weaknesses and a different method, but this is the 4-step process. 1, state the strength. Tell them if it's a practical, ethical or theoretical strength or weakness. 2, specify what you mean. What is that weakness or that strength? We've said it's high in validity, so we have taken 3 sentences or more to really unpack what we mean by high validity, linking it to the method they've given us, unstructured interviews. So here we have looked at the method and we've picked out all of the characteristics that allows us to have a real life picture of what it's setting out to measure. So because we've got open-ended questions, they can fully explain reasons behind their answers. We can use this method to probe further. We're not restricted, we can probe. We can even clarify misunderstandings, and they can ask us for clarification. And this allows rapport. So we've got lots of concepts there. And ultimately, this helps us for understanding complex behaviour. Step 3, name a sociologist who has done that, who has found that strength. Dabash and Dabash. And step 4, relate it back to the significance. Why is it important? So what we're saying here is it allows us not just to measure things like structured interviews would do, patterns and trends, but instead really understand meanings behind the answers, which is obviously going to give us lots of valid data. So there you have it. That is your outline and explain 2, whatever the method comes up, your 4-step process to get into the top band. Now, the next part of the video is what happens if it's not a straightforward method, but much more of a general question or research data. Let's have a look at applying the 4-step process to that. So again, this is a typical question that throws students because a method hasn't come up, it's just very general kind of data. So what happens if this comes up? Outline and explain 2 weaknesses of using qualitative methods. We're going to use exactly the same steps: state, specify, sociologist, and significance. So let me take you through that now. So just like before, we are going to tell them either a practical, an ethical, or a theoretical strength or weakness. So here we're going to look at a practical weakness of using qualitative methods, and we are going to pick time. Yep. So qualitative methods tend to be time consuming, and the reason that could be an issue is, well, there's lots of reasons, but we're going to ultimately link it to cost. So that's step 1 done. So now we're going to specify exactly what we mean by time consuming. Why is qualitative research methods, why are they, time consuming? So qualitative methods involve in-depth, detailed discussions for long periods of time, long periods of observation, can often take weeks, months to build trust, to build rapport, especially if it's sensitive or closed or hidden groups. Once the data has been collected, we also need to interpret and analyse, and that's what many students forget to talk about. They talk about observations taking a long time to get in and get out, but they don't say about the time it takes to interpret, analyse, post the observation, post the research. So that is often a lengthy amount of time, and conversations that are long-winded have to be interpreted. So again, lots of time and characteristics that make this type of method very time-consuming. So that's step 2 done. Step 3 is add the sociologist. We need to think of a sociologist that used a qualitative method which took ages. So I've got James Patrick. He did a study called A Glasgow Gang, and it took ages because it was covert. So you're going to name a qualitative method here, covert participant observation, and you're going to tell them why it took so long. So he studied a violent youth gang in Glasgow. It took him a long time to gain entry because he had to build trust and prove loyalty to the gang without revealing his researcher identity. He then spent months living alongside them, constantly managing suspicion and personal risk to stay accepted. So that's a perfect example of somebody who is using a qualitative method, which is often time consuming. And we've talked them through why it's time consuming. And the last step, what's the significance? Why is this a significant weakness? Well, because qualitative methods take time to complete and in-depth rich data takes time to interpret, it leads to higher costs, which is what we set out to explain at the very beginning of this answer. So it's higher costs because researchers need to be paid or lose wages if they're self-funded. They have to fund every day that they've carried out the research. So every day they're in the field, every day that they are spent hanging around the gang, investigating the gang, trying to get in, trying to get out even, is going to cost whoever is funding the research money. So the significance of it is it's going to be time consuming and costly. So there you have it. Let's have a look at it all together so we can see the answer in full. Step 1 is to state a weakness, practical weakness. Step 2, specify what that weakness is. So qualitative methods involve in-depth, detailed discussions, long periods of observation, etc., etc. Number 3, step 3, bring in a sociologist that had this weakness or found this weakness with their research. Patrick spent months living alongside a gang. And finally, step 4, so what? What is the significance? Well, it's going to be costly. So there you have it, your 4 steps to getting into the top band. But of course, remember, you need to do this twice. You have to find an alternative weakness. And my advice would be, if you've used a practical one for your first weakness, use a different weakness for your second, maybe a theoretical or perhaps an ethical. And finally, what happens if your 10 marker isn't on a method, but it's on a technique? Here is a question that I recently used in one of the mocks for my year 13s, and it did throw a lot of them. They were able to name a type of sampling, but they didn't do the other steps. So step 1, most students can do. They can think of 2 different sampling techniques, but what you do next is going to determine whether you stay in that mid-band, a very basic, superficial understanding of the sampling technique, or whether you move up to the top band. So if you want top band, you need to do all 4 steps. And again, I'm going to show you an example. Okay, so step 1, state the technique. So it's not a strength or weakness this time, it's just a sampling technique. So pick one you're most familiar. So I've picked opportunity sampling. Now you need to specify exactly what opportunity sampling is, and you need to use concepts here. So I've put opportunity sampling is a non-probability sampling technique, so that's a concept in sociology, where the researcher, so I'm now going to explain how it's done, selects participants who are easily available and willing to take part. Rather than choosing people through a systematic or random method, the researcher uses whoever they can access at the time. So I've specified exactly what the sampling technique is. I've got concepts in there, so I'm on my way to the top band. However, if I was to stop here, it would most definitely be a typical mid-band answer. So the next step is going to help me get into the top band, because I'm now going to name a sociologist who's used opportunity sampling. A study that everyone remembers, Humphrey's tea room trade. He used opportunity sampling in his covert study of men engaging in anonymous sexual encounters in public toilets, what is often referred to as tea rooms. Humphreys positioned himself as a watch queen. So what I'm going to do now is I'm now telling the examiner how I know it's opportunity sampling. He took opportunities to observe, later follow up with the men who happened to be present in the tea rooms. Participants were chosen because they were available in that setting, not from a pre-selected list. He gathered data based on who showed up and agreed to take part in interaction, even though they were unaware that, of being studied. So there are some ethical issues. And we may get a bit of analysis marks for raising ethical issues here, but we're not going to unpack that just yet. We don't need to, we're just looking at describing the opportunity sampling, and we've done that really well with a good example. So the next step is to tell them the significance of opportunity sampling. So this type of sampling can uncover hidden social behaviour. It relies on using whoever is readily available, and Humphrey's study shows how this can be useful for studying secretive groups. So there's your significance. So let's put it all together and see what it looks like. So as you can see at the top, we've got step 1, name a sampling technique. Step 2, specify what you mean. What is this sampling technique? Define it using concepts. Step 3, bring in an example of a sociologist that used that sampling technique. And step 4, tell me the significance. Why would we use this type of sampling technique? Why is it readily used in sociology for social research? So I hope this video has been helpful. It's under 15 minutes, or just over 15 minutes actually, but hopefully it's helped you guys to get into more of the top end of the mark scheme. Thanks for watching.